Hello and welcome to Fast Forward, part of an ongoing conversation about living in the future. I'm Dan Costa, editor-in-chief of PCMag.com. And this is a special Mobile World Congress 2018 edition of Fast Forward. We are here on the show floor in the UCLA booth, in the special Spain-based Barcelona studios for PCMag. And we're talking to some of the leaders and pioneers in the digital revolution, and particularly in the mobile space. I have one of those leaders with me right now. It's Filip Chytrý, the technical sales director at Avast. And Avast makes a whole range of security products, including our current editor's choice for free antivirus software, Avast Antivirus. Still the editor's choice and has been for many years, so congratulations on that.
Thank you, Dan.
So we're going to talk about the state of internet security, we're going to talk about how you can protect yourself, and then we're going to talk about the Internet of Things and how that opens up an entirely new sort of can of worms, as it were. Sometimes, not literally, but they are worms.
Brand new attacking vector.
So the Mobile World Congress is a pretty sophisticated crowd, a lot of mobile people, a lot of industry people, but Avast has a long history of making these very sophisticated people look silly and exposing the silly things that they do with their network connections. Can you talk a little bit about your experience there?
Yeah, so we don't do this as of this year, but in the last couple of years, we've been running the, let's say, Wi-Fi experiment when we set up the rogue hotspots around the Mobile World Congress, and specifically at the airport. And one of the funny stories is that basically, you could see the IDs of the devices, and even the non-disclosure devices yet has been popping up on the list. So even some of the high-tech people from really well-known brands and companies been connecting to this hotspot and, let's say, disclosing some of the details of hardware about their devices, which was fun. We never, of course, use any of this information publicly, but you can see how this, let's say, technical crowd is still slippy.
Mm-hmm. So what's the problem with that? Because I've done it, our readers do it, everybody does it. Everybody connects to networks. You want to get online, you just want a fast connection, and you grab whatever's open, as long as it doesn't scream that it's a hack site. But what's the risk there?
So I would actually split it into let's say low and higher risk categories. So in the lower risks, you can of course disclose what is your device, where you are actually running. So if somebody is monitoring more networks, they can see where have you been during the last couple of weeks or days. And they can, let's say, connect or collect the basic data of you are connecting to Facebook or you are connecting to some of your mobile banking apps. But that's not really disclosing any of your really private details like passwords. But the second level to this is the real hackers, which they can set up, let's say, fake and rogue websites. So imagine that you try to open Facebook or you try to open your favorite email app, for example, and that they create actually a fake server, which is faking also the encryption and everything, and creating, let's say, man-in-the-middle attack. So you are landing on the exactly same page as you expected in terms of UI and everything, so you kind of feel trustworthy about it, but you filling up your details into the completely rogue website when somebody can collect your password, login details, and go much deeper in terms of what they've been able to collect about you. It could be credit cards, it could be login details, or it could be just some of your personal data they might ask for.
And this could be anything from the login page that you have to click through to access the network, or you're describing, actually, we go to Facebook, it looks exactly like Facebook, except it's their website, not yours.
Exactly.
And just like that, you've given up all of your personal information.
Exactly.
So how often does this happen?
So I would say that first part, it's really common. That's even in some of the, let's say, well-known brands of hotels, you can see they collect this basic information, how their users are behaving on the network. But this second level approach, we've seen it on some of the really big conferences and events especially, because that's a really interesting crowd to be watching for, right? Mm-hmm. In here, this event is full of CEOs and full of people who are actually working on the secret projects, let's say. So it's really interesting for hackers to set up exactly on events like this, the fake website and rogue Wi-Fi hotspots. In terms of numbers, I would say that this trend is, let's say, stable over the last couple of years, and it's more targeted towards the specific people. So it's really hard to oversee it from the perspective of any AV company in terms of watching how many of these events you've seen across the globe, but they are purely focused on specific people. So you Dan, you might be actually one of the targets in here.
Yeah, I have been. I don't want to ask for any more attention than I already have. So what do you do in this case? Is the solution that you have to install security software on all of your devices? Do you have to use a VPN? What are the steps to protect yourself?
So I always try to explain this as a coconut. So you have to create that hard shell on the top first before you can actually have that soft side inside, right? So in this case, for example, we provide a VPN service, which helps you to encrypt all the data. So even though you don't trust that network, you can make sure that all the domain requests, for example, so you try to open Facebook and it might go to the rogue DNS server with the reply, right? In this case, if you are running over the VPN, you always make sure that this request goes directly to the right specific Facebook website and server. So it's basically securing the connection. And on top of that is, of course, creating the encryption of the entire data packets. So you're creating that hard shell of the coconut. So everything inside stays safe, and it's basically, creating the secure tunnel for you.
And what about antivirus and anti-malware? For a while, I was telling people they didn't need to install antivirus or anti-malware on mobile as long as they stuck with the App Store and Android Play Store and Google Play Store. Is that good advice? Like, why do we need more than that?
So definitely it's a good approach. So if they stick to the official app stores, it's one of the first steps to do. In addition to that, I would just add, Google is not 100% secure. So you can see some of the blog posts over the last year that they basically have a scammy apps on their store, faking official apps such as Instagram and so on. So there were actually fake Instagram apps on the official Google Play Store. So in addition to that, it's of course to have an antivirus which is able to, let's say, compare the app itself, if it's the original one, or if that signature of the app itself is, for example, not official one. So from our side, we compare if that app you just installed is using the official release from the Instagram, and if it's not just branded as an Instagram and published by somebody else. So this could be also helpful in terms of securing your device more, preventing the infection, and in addition to giving you, let's say, more privacy-oriented space on your device because you know more in details what's going on with what you're downloading.
So we've got antivirus on our PCs, which I think we've all gotten used to now on our mobile devices. Are we going to have to create security software, or subscribe to security software for our Amazon Echo and for our voice assistants and our connected home products?
Yeah. So this is a really tough area to be in right now, and we are actually battling into it right now from the head. So it's really hard to secure each device specifically because if you think about it, Amazon is one platform, they're using their own services. Then you buy the webcam from some other company and it's again different software slightly, different rules, how they set up the security. And this is going and on for each of the devices you purchase and have at home. So the best place to focus on is either to have like some, let's say, side device in your home network, which actually monitors the packets and try to oversee what's going on, or be directly on the router. And that's what we introduce as of this year as our new platform, actually.
So you get to keep your own router, but then you build a security device on top of it or coexists with it that will then manage everything that happens throughout your home that goes through that router.
So I would say there are three approaches. One of them is to have, let's say, as a part of your antivirus, a home vulnerability scanner. So that one is capable of at least telling you what the problems are in your network. But unless your device is active, you actually don't know if there are some problems going on, outside the times where you're actually connected with your laptop or cell phone. So the next step to that is to actually place your side device, which is monitoring what's going on. And the approach we took on our side is to basically create the firmware for the router. So you work with the manufacturers of the routers, you work with the OEMs, you work with the mobile carriers, for example, or carriers ISP providers, let's say in this case, where you're replacing the firmware on the existing box to make it more secure and be able to observe the events at home.
Is that that it almost operates separately from all the separate devices? It doesn't matter what you bring into your home. If you get a Nest, if you get a smart camera, it'll be able to detect the packets on a packet level and not on the device level necessarily.
Exactly. So you're basically looking for the basic behaviors, such as what time this device is connecting to, where does it actually connecting to. So if it was connecting to some server in the US within the last 8 months, why is it connecting to server in China right now? That's already like a suspicious event, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't necessarily need to know what that device is, but you're just creating, let's say, the behavioral maps of what is normal for your home or family or small office.
Why aren't these security protections being put in place by the hardware manufacturers? Like, why doesn't Nest and the webcam manufacturers and why don't they build security into their products from the beginning?
So it's really hard for them. Imagine you are somebody who was building toasters, washing machines over the last 50 years maybe, and now you are actually like, okay, everybody is going towards the IoT space, and we don't know how to do this. Let's just purchase some cheap IoT network kit we can buy from some third-party company and let some third-party developer to develop the app, right? They already have a high cost to delivering those services on the market, and they are not necessarily the right people who will be able to create the software and firmware for those devices and make it at least, you know, basic security measures on those devices. So in general, I would say, I don't want to like name any of the companies.
I was hoping you would.
So
you're here to actually make partnerships with those companies.
So some of them are, of course, let's put it this way. You mentioned Nest and Alexa already. Mm-hmm. So those guys are actually doing it pretty well right now. So they at least use some basic encryption standards and monitoring of the devices. But there are thousands of others who are not having any of the encryption. And I even seen some like brand new printers on the market which still use the HTTPS and HTTP, not even like encrypted connections to their website servers with the logging details of their printers. So basically anybody can sort of hack into them. So again, I can't name the brands, but I would say like more than half of the devices which are currently sold on the markets having some sort of security troubles.
That's a big prediction. More than half of the IoT devices on the market you think have some kind of security problems.
Yeah. So based on our scans in the US right now, I can tell you that from the homes where we have our solutions installed, we provide the home network security scanner as a part of the AV or even the free AV. And we can tell you that 46% of the homes in the US right now have at least one vulnerability as we classified in our antivirus, IoT vulnerability, which is almost a half, right?
Yeah, that's about 50, almost a half. I think you can get elected president in the United States with 46% of the vote. We're working on changing that. So talk to me a little bit about those scans, because we're talking about the biggest mistake consumers make on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. A lot of times is just using bad passwords. And you've got a scanner that you've got customers, and you can see when they're using bad passwords. Yeah. How is that problem not fixed yet? Because I've been writing that story for 10 years, and the passwords haven't changed much.
So if we're speaking about passwords, I don't want to say that we have all the passwords. We only have the passwords for, let's say, your home IoT devices, when we actually scan for the vulnerability. So we try to find out if your webcam is secure, if your router is secured. So those are the type of scans we have included. And we basically try to do some, let's say, rainbow tabling a little bit. So we try to scan the device and figure out if it's vulnerable or if it's using the basic passwords. And that, as you mentioned, that is actually a pretty terrible place right now, because most common password in the US is still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the other really simple passwords are following. I'm happy to share some of these stats with you. So
yeah, and it's a good news that it used to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, and now it's actually 8.
Now we go to 8, so that's a big improvement for the American public.
Just in addition to that is people basically don't realize what the security risks they are into, right? They don't realize like when they buy the box from the store, they should actually set it up a little bit. So I would even blame a little bit the manufacturers in here, because it's not that hard to create the flow at the very beginning for the setup of those devices to make it more secure. So, if you bring the whole router at home, it will ask you to change the password, and it will basically not work unless you do that. So that, just some simplistic manuals like this could actually really improve the entire ecosystem.
So what about your particular security habits? Now you're pretty sophisticated. You can break things, you can break into things, but what do you do on a day-to-day basis to protect yourself? Obviously, you run Avast antivirus on all of your systems, but what other steps do you take?
Yeah, so I'm, let's say, a little bit precautious in terms of passwords. So I have different levels of passwords I'm using by myself personally. So I don't trust the password managers that much anymore. So
why not?
Some of the databases leaked in the recent couple of years. So the only one I actually trust right now is the Avast password manager in my case.
Shocking.
But we have like me personally, I'm using different levels of passwords. So let's say I have 10 passwords, different setups for each of the services. So as everybody's saying, like, it's good to use the different password for each service, I can't memorize that in my case. So I'm having like, social media, which I'm not using, one password, but still really complex. It's like 16 signs. So let's say passwords, step number 1. The second part, in my case, encryption. So all my devices are actually encrypted, and they have a special password for the BIOS. So if you want to wipe out the device, or if you want to get the data out of it, you actually have to go through the BIOS and booting sectors of each of them to get the more details. So encryption in general. Then, as you mentioned, antivirus and protection. So those are, let's say, basic 3 steps which can help you to protect your device. And if you want to go further of that, it's of course some backing up of the storage and devices you have, or creating the rules. So this is really sophisticated part for homeowners, let's say, or small offices. But it's always nice to say like, okay, I want to create the rules for each of my home devices that certain ports are closed for my TV, for example. So, you know, nobody can actually access my TV from outside. It's a little bit more sophisticated, but I would definitely recommend that, especially when you're buying cheap, you know, cameras from different regions of the world, or if you're buying some cheap printers, it's definitely good to make some firewall setups by yourself on your router.
And I think that's exactly where we lose most people, is once you start saying you have to close these ports, people's eyes glaze over and they don't know how to do it. And they're afraid, and they're afraid they're going to break it, and therefore they don't do it.
Yeah. So that's the place where I can say that our home network security can at least list you the problems you have in your network and give you recommendations of like what to do. So step-by-step manual of like, go to the settings of your router, close these ports because we don't believe it's secure to have them open to the internet.
All right, I want to ask you some of the questions that I ask everybody that comes on the show. What technological trend concerns you the most? Is there anything that keeps you up at night?
So since we're talking about IoT, it's exactly that space, because everything is being collected today, and it's not just your cell phone you're carrying with you, which actually has all the data and all the touch points of what you do daily. But I'm a, let's say, fairly technical user, so I have even light bulbs connected. I have even, you know, everything in my home is basically connected today, Nest and so on. So each of these companies is actually learning my behavior, and some of these devices could have the vulnerability which could potentially leak some of my data. So I'm always saying your entire digital life is as secure as the weakest part of it, right? So if you breach that weakest chain or weakest part of the chain in your network or in your digital habits, you're basically accessing your entire digital life. And as of today, I mean, you probably have your passport, and you think like, I can lose my passport. But I would even doubt that if you lose your passport, you can get a new one. But if you lose your digital access to your emails, social media, and so on, you might be in a bigger trouble than with that passport these days.
Yeah, you can't unlose it.
Yeah,
once it's gone,
exactly.
Anybody will have access. Is there a product, a service, or a gadget that you use every day that inspires wonder, and it can't be a product made by Avast?
That's a tough question, I would say. I don't want to put the brands again in front of here. So
this is just your personal. It's not a professional endorsement. It's just your personal thing that's changed your life.
It might sounds too easy, but recently I changed my alarm clock for the automatic electric shades. Oh, nice. So instead of like having the buzzer in the morning, it opens the shades for me based on the setup. So it's awesome.
That's a pretty great example.
Yeah. And that actually changed my life, because I always hated the buzzer, and now it's just windows are basically opening automatically for me.
It's a great example of a relatively simple technology that makes a big difference in your life.
Yeah. In my personal case, I love it. It was the best decision over the last 6 months for me. So,
fantastic. So if people want to follow what you're doing and what Avast is doing, how can they find you online?
So definitely Avast website, or follow us on Twitter under the hashtag Avast, I believe.
Very good. Filip, thanks so much for coming by.
Thank you, Dan.
Have a great show.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome being here. Thank you, guys.
That's Fast Forward for today. We're going to have more episodes, of course. Follow along on all of our MWC coverage on PCMag.com. And if you want back episodes of Fast Forward, you can find those on PCMag.com as well. I'll see you in the future.